first Black Nobel Prize laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka. I'm not going to say much, I'm going to let him speak to you. He's going to talk to you, and then you have an opportunity to ask questions. So enjoy your assembly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, good. It's still morning, I think. I'm never sure where I am at any given time. I'm in London right now, UK, so it's still morning here. And I never hesitate when I'm invited to address the young. I have that, call it weakness if you like, because I know the young will grow up to be just like us anyway, just as reprobate and unreliable. Right now, however, we're in that age where it's wonderful to believe that one is dealing with, not entirely with innocence, but at least with an openness to the whole world, to experience, to phenomena. There's a period when you make up your minds about things, about adults, about development, about the very world you live in. But I'm not going to make this too much a profound exchange. I should introduce myself properly by saying that I'm a native of these parts. In fact, I'm a native of most of the parts of London and Leeds as well. But London, curiously enough, is where I think I became a proper native. Because when I graduated from Leeds, I became what was known as a supply teacher. And I had a bicycle. I also had a guitar. And when you're a supply teacher, it means you just wait until there's a vacancy and your phone, your telephone, say, can you teach this subject? And of course, as an impecunious young African new graduate, it didn't matter whether the subject was trigonometry or knitting. I always said, yes, I can teach it. And what I enjoyed, of course, was being taught in turn. Many subjects which I didn't even like generally, but I was able to watch students, the young minds, develop around subjects which I did not even understand. And I shall end this little peroration with a story about myself and about subjects which I hated in school. But I'll complete that by telling you that I cycled from the best schools to the worst, to the most violent in London, and I had to learn to cope with even young people who used to ask themselves and me, what are we doing here? I want to go and tend my father's shop. That's what I've decided. I want to be a miner. So why am I being forced to come and learn things I don't really like? And this is related to this little anecdote, which I'm going to end my introduction to the speech with. I hated mathematics. I hated anything to do with calculation. I was born a raconteur, that is, I just love literature, of listening to stories, and then making up my own. I was playing variations on whatever I heard. I was never satisfied with the way adults told these stories, or even what I read in school. The one thing I knew I understood was I hated mathematics. Well, I got into political trouble. I still do, even at this stage, believe it or not. And I found myself in prison detention, in solitary confinement. Altogether, I was in detention without trial for 27 months. 22 months of those were in solitary confinement. And books were denied me, writing material. The whole idea was that I should be in isolation and would presumably lose my mind. Maybe that was the intention. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What was I supposed to do with my mind, with no reading material? So I said, well, when I was in school, there was one subject which I hated, and that was mathematics. I managed to get through, mind you, my Cambridge School certificate by swatting, what is known as swatting. You memorize all the theorems, you memorize all the equations and so on, and so when you get to the exam hall, You look very quickly which ones before it passes out. So you deal with proving theorems and so on. And that's how I managed to scrape through with a C school certificate. The moment the exam was over, I took all my maths books, threw them out of the window, and began looking for those teachers who tortured me when I was a student. I said I would deal with them first. So now, there was I, in prison detention, isolation, no books, no paper. But there was the earth, and there were sticks, and there were stones also, with which one can scratch on walls. I said, let me go back to this subject which I hated, since I had nothing else to do. And you know, with mathematics, you make calculations and so on. And mathematics is actually a very beautiful subject, especially when you hate it and you need it. I began now to try and recover those things I had learned in school, which were wonderful. So I began, for instance, with the formula for permutations and combinations. I said, you combine things. And in prison, of course, you had stones, you had betel wood, and so you had items which you could actually quantify. And I began to try and rediscover the theorem for permutations and combinations. It whiled away hours. You know, I told you I was a mathematical dunce. So hours passed fighting, struggling to recover these principles of calculation until eventually I worked it out. And from that, I moved to other aspects of algebra, trigonometry, geometry, of course, which responded to a lot of aesthetic shapes, relationship of shapes anyway. So through even my artistic, my humanities tendency, I was able actually to transfer my mind to the mathematical field. So today, even when my children try to talk mathematics, I say, please don't talk to your superior in this particular aspect of the subject. But it was a lesson to me, and that's one lesson which I always try to inflict on young people, that never give up completely on any subject, because you never know when it might save your life or your sanity. And also to be able to discover the relationship between the various disciplines. Discover that when you talk aesthetics, in fact, they're involved in principles of mathematical relations and so on. That is nothing, no subject is really totally divorced from another. That has been the biggest lesson of my life. And I learned it the hard way, but it actually developed me even more as a human being. And today I have only one more ambition. Only one more ambition. And after you ask all your questions, I will ask you to guess what you think that ambition is. Now remember, I call myself a failed architect. In other words, I wanted to be an architect. I also wanted to be a musician. I still am an amateur musician, but more a consumer. I still use music in my plays and so on and so forth. And at one time I wanted to be a pilot, and of course in those days you have to pass the mathematics test before you can be chosen to be a pilot, so I wanted to be everything. And I regret nothing at all what I missed what I didn't become. I have one more ambition, all the various disciplines. I finished now, you'll ask your questions, and then at the end I'll ask anybody good things. You know, one discipline may have regretted not following, not becoming a certain professional in a certain respect. And whoever gets it right will get a special autograph book from me. And whoever gives the worst answer will owe me a bottle of my favorite wine. Okay, now questions.